Welcome to this live session in which we are going to cover the enumerate function in Python. Let's wait for a couple more minutes so that everyone can join and then we'll begin. I think by now everyone must have joined. So let us begin. Rather than just starting off and telling you what the enumerate function does in Python, first we're going to look at some examples of the for loop. So now imagine you have yourselves a list. Okay, let's name this as my list. And now in my list you have the elements 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 up to 10. Okay, now imagine you have to access these elements and then you also have to access the index of these elements, right? So you'd say for value in my list, print value and print index, right? And then you'd want that the index should increase itself by 1. This is a very rudimentary form. I know some of you might know a lot more Python than this, but we're going to go a bit slowly. So right, we name a variable known as index and then we increment it with each passing value. And if I run this code, then you'd see that the code is printing each element and the corresponding index. That's what we want, right? Now what also could have been done is that instead of accessing every value in the list, we would just access the index only from the very beginning, right? So if we have the same list, so for index in range length of my list, right? So if you're not accessing the element of each list, then you would access each index of the list and then you'd print index and then you print whatever is present in the list at that particular index, right? Gives, oh, I'm sorry, I've kind of reversed the order. Yes, so now we have a similar output as to what we have above, right? But now here comes the enumerate function. Okay, I've shown you two ways where you can access the index as well as the element of the list. I'm going to write some code and I'm going to show you what the enumerate function does, and then maybe I'll go on and tell you how it does and what are its applications. Okay, but in the very beginning, let's just function on the code part. I'll just put it out there and then I'll explain to you how it functions, right? So enumerate function, I'd have to pass both the index and the value while running the for loop. And I would print value and index, right? So the output is the same, just like we've wanted, right? And now, however, this code is different from all that we've had here, right? All that we've done up until now, this code is a bit different from that, right? Because it is using the enumerate function. Now, what is important to note is that in the enumerate function, when running the enumerate function, you define two variables. One is a counter to the index, and one is pointing to the value of the list. Okay. Now imagine that I don't want my index to begin from 0, right? In for loop, if you're printing the index will always begin from 0, but for some reason you want to have one indexing, right? You want the 0th index to not be the 0th index, to not start from 0, but to start from 1, and then 2, 3, and so forth, right? So now this cannot be done if I am to use a for loop by just accessing the list or by accessing the index of the list. However, enumerate function provides a method to do this, that is adding another argument in the function, and I can start from whichever index I want. Okay, so if I run this code, so as you can see, it will start from 1 and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be the index value that I will get, right? So now this provides much more functionality. Okay, but then probably you would wonder that how will enumerate function be used in any of the real life terms, or in anywhere, in any real life sense. So now imagine you have a list, let's call that integers, right? So it is a list, it's a list from range 1 to 11, 1 to 10, 11 is not included, right? So if I print integers, you would be able to see that this is my list of integers up to 10, starting from 1. Okay, now what I want to do is that I want to extract the even elements out of this list, right? I want to extract 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right? And then I want to return it in another list. So my output list should be something like this, right? This is my desired output list. Now there are many ways of doing this. First and foremost, we'll do it in a very basic methodology by not using the enumerate function, right? So for value in integers, I would check that the value at hand is divisible by 2 or not. If it is divisible by 2, then I need to put it in another list. So I will name another list by the name of final list, and if value is divisible by 2, that means modulo of value with 2 equals to 0, then append this value to the final list. Okay, and now if I print the final list, this is what I get, right? This was my desired output. This is something that probably most of you would know, right? But now we're going to do it in a different manner. We're going to use the enumerate function. Let's just define even, let's just define the function even, and it takes an iterable as its argument. So an iterable is anything that you can iterate through, right? A string, a list, it can be referred to as an iterable. So now final list we would have to define here also, and for index and value in enumerate of integers, right? This obviously we will do because we're using the enumerate function. So now what we have to do is that we have to take the integers which are divisible by 2, right? Now instead of referring to the value, instead of of course you can refer to the value here also. If value is modulo 2 return 0, then final list dot append value and then return final list. So if I pass the integers, I'm sorry, here I had to write iterable. So if I pass the integers in the even function, it will give me this list. Okay, now there's a small change to the question. The change to the question is that in this list of integers that you have, you do not have to pick out the integers that are even. You have to pick out the integers that are placed at an even index. And you have to consider the indexing from 1. That is, the first element would be index 1 and not index 0. Right? So element 1 would be placed at index 1, element 2 would be placed at index 2, so far up until 10. Right? So you have to take out the elements which are placed at even index and are not even themselves. Also keeping in mind that your indexing starts from 1 and not 0. So how will you tackle this question? Here we are going to make a small change, that instead of checking the value that should be divisible by 2, we are going to check if the index is divisible by 2. That should solve our problem, right? Except there is one more change. It is mentioned in the question that the indexing is starting from 1 and not 0. So we have to add start as well to that. Right? Now if I run this code and I get the even integers, the answer remains same because we've used a list where the indexing is similar to the what you call values of the list. However, if I change the list a bit and I started from 0 rather than 1, so you would see the answer changes. So 1 is present at an even index, but itself 1 is an odd number. Okay, now this seems like a very small example and you might not relate much to it, and you might feel that this is something that's not even needed, right? So let me give you a better example. Imagine there is a string of all the alphabets in the English language. So A, B, C, D. I think I have covered all. Let me just check the length of string. 26. Yes. So this is a string that contains all the alphabets of the English language, right? Now what I want to do is I want to extract alphabets that are at an even index, right? Just like I've done in the above list. Now if I pass this string to the even function, so you see I'll get a list of alphabets that are evenly placed. And if I check the length of this list, I'll get 13. So out of 26, there are 13 elements that are placed evenly. So B is the second alphabet. Second alphabet 2 is obviously divisible by 2. So it is placed in the final list. Okay. Now let's one more topic. Not topic actually, I'll just this is a shorthand notation that if you ever want to equate something to 0, you can use the binary terminologies as well. So instead of writing if modulo of idx with 2 is equal to 0, we can also write if not idx, right? This would give us the exact same result. What is not doing here? So not basically acts as, let me just explain it to you. In Python, if I have a variable, let's say a is a variable, and if I say if not a, so what does this not a represents? So not a basically checks that a is equal to 0 or not. If it is equal to 0, then it would be termed as not A. If A is not equal to 0, then it would be referred to as if A. Okay, this is a small shorthand notation that might be useful to you, it may not be, but it is always good to know that there is a second way of writing this as well. So this just covers basically all null values, and this covers all non-null values, right? So sometimes you might have a multiplication that would end up in a 0, an addition or a subtraction, any mathematical operation. So you do not always depend on the modulo to equal to be 0. So you can use the not a and not variable or if variable, right? Let's just let me just explain it to you. So if my variable is 0, and if variable print variable not equal to 0, actually it should be variable has a non-null value, and else print variable has a null value. So it will print that variable has a null value. And if I do not want to put in this else statement, I can also put if not variable, then also variable has a null value is being printed because the variable equals to 0. Okay, now we just cover up this topic and we'd focus on one more thing, that is how does the enumerate function work. Okay, what does it basically represent? Now imagine a list. Okay, in this list you have, let's say, an apple, a mango and a banana. Yes, so now if I do enumerate of thus said list, it will give me enumerate at this particular position. That is, it is giving me a generator object. It returns me a Python object. Okay, now this does not clear things up as to why am I being given an index also and why am I being given a value also, right? So now there are 3 elements in this list. Then I say a comma b comma c equals to enumerate of list, right? So now if I try checking what is a, so a, in a you can see that a is a tuple where a of 0 would be a pointer to the index and a of 1 would be a pointer to the value of the element in this particular list. Okay, similarly if I try checking what is b, then it will be 1 comma mango, c it will be 2 comma banana. However, if I change the starting index, let's say the starting index is 5, right? So a would be 5 comma apple, b would be 6 comma mango and c would be 7 comma banana, right? So that's pretty much all in enumerate. Enumerate function is used over for loop because I'm just going to tell you this. It does not need to have a theoretical explanation right now, but enumerate function is faster than a simple for loop. Okay, so how is beyond the topic of this discussion, but if there is a scenario where you need to have the index as well as the value of the element in the particular list, then it is always preferred to use the enumerate function over the regular for function. So let's just do a quick recap of whatever we've learned in this particular lesson. So we've learned that if you want to access an index, the basic way of doing that is to creating an index variable and increasing the index variable by 1 as and when you pass through the list. Another option would be to create an index variable and run it through the range of the length of the list, and then you access the said elements and the index as well. And finally we learned that if you pass index and value together in the for function and use the enumerate function also, you can print the value and index at the same time, and you can start the index from whichever value you want to. Okay. We've also learned how to print even integers or even indexed integers. We've also learned that what does the enumerate function basically does. Okay, I hope everything is clear to you guys. If there is anything that is still clouding up your mind, or there are some doubts that you have about the topic, please mention them in the comments and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible.